The Galactic Council chamber had seen a lot of stupid decisions in its 3,000-year history. But this one was about to win first prize in the Stupidity Olympics, and the competition was fierce. Commander Vrextal of the Crothian Imperial Guard stood at attention, his 4 arms crossed in what he believed was an intimidating posture. Behind him, 4 more warriors from different species formed a semicircle, each one a champion of their respective worlds. There was Kelthon, the crystalline Zephyrite whose body refracted light into weapon-grade lasers. Morgan, a 9-foot-tall Bracken whose exoskeleton could withstand plasma fire. Thesara, a Velkari assassin whose neural implants let her predict opponent movements 3 seconds into the future. And finally, Court, a hive mind soldier who was technically 7 beings operating one body, which seemed like cheating, but nobody wanted to argue with a collective consciousness. They were the best, the absolute pinnacle of galactic military achievement, combined battle experience of over 2 centuries, undefeated in formal combat, legendary, and they were about to get their butts absolutely handed to them by a human who was currently eating what appeared to be a sandwich. Captain Jennifer Jinx Martinez of the Terran Defense Corps didn't even look up from her lunch. She was leaning against a storage crate in the corner of the training arena, having been summoned here by the Council for what they called a demonstration of comparative combat capabilities, which was political speak for, "We want to prove humans aren't that special so we can justify paying you less for your services." "So," Jinx said, taking another bite and speaking with her mouth embarrassingly full, "let me get this straight. You 5 tough guys want to fight me, all at once?" Vrextal's mandibles clicked with irritation. "You dare mock us, human. We are the elite guard of the Council. We have defeated armies. We have conquered worlds. You are one small female of a species that has been spacefaring for barely 200 of your years." Jinx chewed thoughtfully, examining her sandwich like it was the most interesting thing in the room. It was turkey and avocado, by the way. Good avocado, too, perfectly ripe, hard to find in space. 200 years. Man, you guys really know how to make a girl feel inexperienced. Kelthon's crystalline form shimmered with indignation. The Council has decreed that humanity's request for Tier 2 mercenary rates is excessive. Your species demands compensation equivalent to the Drexian commandos, despite having a fraction of their combat record. Another bite. Jinx was really taking her time with this sandwich. You could see a vein starting to throb on Vrextal's forehead. Well, where his forehead would be if Crothians had foreheads. It was more of a chitin plate situation, but the vein was definitely throbbing under there. "We will prove," Vrextal continued, his voice dropping into what he probably thought was a menacing register, "that human warriors are not worth their exorbitant fees, that your victories have been luck and circumstance, that you are, in essence, unremarkable." Jinx nodded slowly, finally looking up from her meal. Her eyes, which were a completely ordinary brown that somehow managed to look absolutely terrifying in the right light, scanned the 5 warriors with the kind of casual assessment you'd give to furniture you were thinking about rearranging. Cool, she said. "Just so we're clear, though, when I kick all your butts in under a minute, the Council's gonna approve our rate increase, right? That's the deal?" Ambassador Krell, watching from the observation deck above, made a sound like a constipated elephant seal. He was a Plutarian, which meant he was basically a very large, very pompous walrus in a suit. If, and this is purely hypothetical, you were to somehow, impossibly, achieve victory against 5 of our finest warriors, then yes, the Council would reconsider its position. Reconsider. That's politician for yes? It is politician for we will discuss the matter. So, no. It is complicated. It's really not. Jinx popped the last piece of sandwich into her mouth, chewed, swallowed, and wiped her hands on her pants. Her pants, by the way, were standard military fatigues that had seen better days, covered in patches and stains that told the story of 100 battles. Her shirt was a faded band tee for some group called the quantum catfish, that nobody in the galaxy had heard of except humans, and apparently even most humans hadn't heard of them. She wore exactly 0 armor, carried exactly 0 visible weapons, and had exactly 0 concern showing on her face. The 5 warriors spread out, taking position. They'd clearly practiced this formation. Vrextal at center, the others creating a pentagonal attack pattern that would allow them to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. It was textbook advanced combat tactics. Beautiful, really, if you were into that sort of thing. Jinx cracked her knuckles, then her neck, then her back, then several other things that probably didn't need cracking, but she cracked them anyway. The sound echoed through the arena like a percussion symphony of imminent violence. "Okay," she said, grinning. "Let's dance." Vrextal raised one of his 4 arms, holding it aloft for just a moment, the universal signal for "this is happening now." Then he dropped it, and all 5 warriors moved as one, and that's when things got hilarious. See, the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy kept forgetting, despite being reminded of it regularly and painfully, was that humans were persistence predators from a death world who evolved by being too stupid to know when to quit. They weren't the strongest species, not even close. They weren't the fastest. Their reaction times were middling at best. They didn't have natural armor or venom or the ability to photosynthesize their own food. What they had was spite and pattern recognition and an absolutely unhinged willingness to try things that no sane species would consider. Kelthon fired first, a concentrated beam of refracted light that could cut through starship hull plating. It was beautiful, really. A lance of pure prismatic death moving at, well, the speed of light. Jinx moved before the light did. Not faster than light, that would be stupid, but she moved before the light beam was fully formed, reading the subtle shift in Kelthon's body, the way light began to gather and refract inside his crystalline structure. Humans called it telegraphing. This universal tendency for living beings to prepare for their actions in tiny, observable ways. The beam missed her by 3 inches, which in combat terms might as well be 3 miles. Morgan came in from the right, those massive bracken arms swinging in a pattern that should have crushed anything in its path. Jinx stepped forward, inside the arc of the swing, and did something that made Ambassador Krell physically gasp in the observation deck. She punched Morgan in what appeared to be his armpit. Now, bracken exoskeletons could withstand plasma fire. They could shrug off kinetic rounds. They were basically biological tanks, but evolution, in its infinite wisdom, had to put joints somewhere, and joints were always weak points. Jinx's fist, moving with the kind of precision that came from thousands of hours of training, found the gap between plates at Morgan's shoulder joint and struck directly into the neural cluster housed there. Morgan made a sound like a garbage disposal trying to eat a spoon and went down on one knee, his entire right side temporarily paralyzed. "One," Jinx said cheerfully. Thessera, the Velkari assassin, was already moving. Her neural implants had predicted 17 possible attack patterns from the human, and she'd prepared counters for all of them. What her implants hadn't predicted was pattern 18, which was apparently, do something so stupid it doesn't register as a viable combat option. Jinx grabbed Morgan's paralyzed arm and used the 9-foot-tall bracken as a meat shield, or more accurately, a meat flail. She physically swung him, all 400 pounds of him, into Thessera's attack path. The Velkari assassin's blade, which could cut through molecular bonds, buried itself 3 inches deep into Morgan's exoskeleton. It didn't hurt him, he had 6 inches of armor there, but it did get stuck. And while Thessera was trying to extract her weapon from her impromptu bracken sheath, Jinx simply pushed. Morgan fell forward. On to Thessera, who went down under several hundred pounds of confused bracken. 2, Jinx counted. Court, being 7 minds in one body, should have learned from watching the first 2 go down, should have adapted, should have approached this more carefully. Court did not do any of these things, because Court's 7. Minds were currently having an argument about whether what they just witnessed was actually possible according to the laws of physics, and committee decisions are always slow. Jinx kicked a maintenance drone that happened to be near the edge of the arena. The small disc-shaped robot, which was just minding its own business and probably thinking about whatever maintenance drones think about, flew through the air and struck Court directly in its central processing node. The hive mind soldier stumbled, its 7 components briefly losing synchronization. It didn't fall, but it did stagger backward, and in that moment of disorientation, Jinx was already there, behind it somehow, and she did something to the back of its neck that made all 7 components of the hive mind simultaneously decide that consciousness was optional today. Court dropped like a sack of very confused potatoes. 3. Which left Vrextal and Kelthon, and both of them were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, they'd made a tactical error. "You cannot defeat us all," Vrextal said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now. 3 of his comrades were down in less than 30 seconds, and the human hadn't even broken a sweat, hadn't even used a weapon, was still grinning like this was the most fun she'd had all week. "Buddy," Jinx said, stretching her arms above her head like she was warming up. "I already did." Vrextal charged. All 4 arms drew blades, each one vibrating at frequencies that could disrupt molecular cohesion. He was fast, credit where credit was due. He closed the distance in less than a second, blades weaving a pattern of death that left no opening, no gap, no possibility of survival. Jinx fell backward, just straight up fell like someone had cut her strings. Dropped to her back on the arena floor, while Vrextal's blades carved the air where her torso had been a microsecond before. Then, before gravity even had a chance to fully pull her down, she kicked upward with both legs, catching Vrextal in what would be his stomach if Crothians had stomachs in the traditional sense. They didn't, but they did have a central nerve nexus in roughly the same location, and Jinx's boots found it with the precision of a surgeon. Vrextal's forearms went limp, his blades clattered to the floor, his eyes rolled back, and he joined his colleagues in the rapidly growing pile of unconscious warriors. 4. Kelthon, to his credit, didn't charge. He'd watched 4 highly trained combatants get absolutely demolished by a woman who approached combat the way a jazz musician approached a piano. Improvisation, instinct, and a fundamental disregard for conventional rules. "You are not human," Kelthon said, his crystalline voice resonating with confusion and maybe a touch of fear. "No human could move like that, fight like that. You must be augmented, enhanced, modified." Jinx looked down at herself, then back up at Kelthon. "Dude, I'm running on turkey sandwich and spite. That's it. That's the whole enhancement." "Impossible." "Yeah, I get that a lot." She started walking toward him, casual, like she was strolling through a park and not approaching a warrior who could literally shoot laser beams. "You want to know the secret? The thing that makes humans so dangerous?" Kelthon's body began to glow, light gathering, preparing for a final desperate attack. "What is it?" "We evolved fighting each other." Jinx's grin widened. "Every other species in the galaxy, you guys developed combat tactics for fighting predators or prey or the environment. But humans? We spent 100,000 years figuring out how to fight other humans. We got really, really good at predicting what bipedal tool users are going to do, because if we didn't, someone from the tribe over the hill would bash our heads in with a rock." The light inside Kelthon reached critical mass. "That makes no sense." "None of the scary stuff about humans makes sense, buddy. That's what makes it scary." Kelthon fired everything he had, a beam that could cut through a building. All his energy, all his power, focused into one shot that would either end this fight or leave him completely depleted. Jinx held up her hand. Now this is the part where it should be mentioned that Jinx was wearing gloves. Not armored gloves, not energy field gloves, not any kind of special combat gloves, just regular fingerless workout gloves that she probably bought at some human sporting goods store for like 15 credits. But in her palm, Pressed against her skin under those gloves was a small disc, a maintenance drone's reflective surface panel that she'd somehow palmed earlier in the fight. When, nobody could say, humans were weirdly good at sleight of hand. The laser beam hit the reflective panel and bounced, not perfectly, but enough to redirect it away from Jinx and into the arena wall, where it carved a very artistic scorch mark that looked vaguely like a bird if you tilted your head and squinted. Kelthon, now depleted, just stood there. "How did you—" "Magic," Jinx said, and then she was in front of him, moving faster than a crystalline being could process, and she simply pushed him over. He fell with a crash like a chandelier in an earthquake. 5, Jinx dusted off her hands. "And that's time, folks." She looked up at the observation deck where Ambassador Krell and the rest of the council sat in stunned silence. Her grin was now less friendly and more predatory. "So, about that rate increase?" The silence stretched for a long, uncomfortable moment. Finally, Councillor Thress, a Makthari diplomat whose species were known for their logical minds and inability to process embarrassment, spoke. "That was 43 seconds. "Felt longer," Jinx said. "Might have been the adrenaline." "You defeated 5 of our finest warriors in 43 seconds, without weapons, without armor, and with what appears to be a sandwich in your system." "Turkey and avocado," Jinx confirmed. "Really good avocado." Ambassador Krell made that constipated elephant seal sound again. This is unprecedented, unacceptable. There must have been some mistake. Perhaps the warriors were not properly prepared. Perhaps they underestimated you. Perhaps you should pay humans what they're worth," Jinx interrupted, "before we get bored of working for the council and start accepting contracts from people who appreciate us." That got their attention. Every diplomat in the observation deck suddenly sat up straighter. The thing about humans was that they were terrifyingly good at combat, but they were also terrifyingly good at holding grudges. And if humanity decided to go freelance, well, there were a lot of organizations in the galaxy who would pay handsomely for that kind of talent. Organizations that the council definitely didn't want armed with human mercenaries. Councillor Thress's whiskers twitched. "The council will approve Tier 2 rates for human military contractors, effective immediately." "And back pay for the last 6 months we've been arguing about this?" "That is not—" "Back pay," Jinx repeated, her voice still cheerful but with an edge now, "or I walk out of here and the first thing I do is call my buddy Marcus, who works security for the Xanthi Syndicate." "You know Marcus?" "Great guy. Loves his job. Would love it even more if I told him the Syndicate was hiring." The council members exchanged glances. The Xanthi Syndicate was, to put it mildly, not their favorite organization. If humans started working for them in significant numbers, the balance of power in 3 sectors would shift overnight. "Back pay will be included," Krell said, sounding like each word was physically painful. "Tier 2 rates, retroactive 6 months, full human military contractors." "Pleasure doing business with you." Jinx gave a little mock salute. "Oh, and you might want to get a medical team down here. Pretty sure Vrextal is going to need his pride checked when he wakes up." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at the pile of groaning warriors who were starting to regain consciousness. "No hard feelings, guys. You're all really good at what you do. It's just that humans are built different, you know? We come from a planet that's trying to kill us every day, so we learn to be unkillable. It's a whole thing." Vrextal, one eye open, mandibles clicking weakly, managed to croak out a question. "How? How did you know where to strike? Our weak points are classified military secrets." Jinx shrugged. "Buddy, everything living has weak points. Joints, nerve clusters, sensory organs. You just gotta look for them. Plus, I fought a Crothian honor guard on Rigel 7 last year. Guy taught me a lot before I had to kick his butt too." "That was you?" Vrextal's 4 eyes widened. "The incident at the embassy?" "Incident is a strong word. I prefer to call it an educational exchange. You destroyed an entire wing of the building. Educational and structural exchange." Morgan, still pinned under his own weight with Thessera somewhere beneath him, groaned. "You used me as a weapon." "Yeah, that was pretty great," Jinx agreed. You're very aerodynamic for a guy made of rocks." "I am not made of rocks." "Chitin, rocks, same principle. Hard, throwable, excellent for hitting other people with." Thessera's muffled voice came from somewhere under Morgan. "My implants predicted 17 combat patterns. 17. They cost me 3 years of salary." "Maybe ask for a refund," Jinx suggested helpfully. "Tell them they forgot to program in the 'humans are crazy' variable." Court's 7 voices spoke in ragged harmony. "We still do not understand what you did to our neural network." "Nerve pinch. Very simple. Learned it from a human martial art called watching too much science fiction TV." Jinx started walking toward the exit for real this time. "You all fought really well, though. Seriously, in a fair fight, you probably would have won." "This was not a fair fight?" Kelthon asked from his position on the floor. "Nope. You had numbers, home field advantage, and superior reach. I just had experience fighting humans, which is way harder than fighting you guys." "How is that harder?" Vrextal demanded. "We are trained warriors." "Yeah, but you're trained to fight logically, efficiently, to use your natural advantages." Jinx looked back over her shoulder, still grinning. "Humans don't fight like that. We fight dirty. We improvise. We use the environment, each other, random maintenance drones, whatever's available. You can't predict us because half the time we don't even know what we're gonna do until we do it." She paused at the door. "Also, we're stubborn as hell, and we refuse to lose because losing is boring. That helps too." And then she was gone, leaving 5 of the galaxy's finest warriors groaning on the floor of the training arena, their pride significantly more damaged than their bodies. In the observation deck, Ambassador Krell turned to face the rest of the council. "So, we are all in agreement. We never speak of this again." There was a chorus of agreement. Some things were too embarrassing to go in official records. Counselor Thress, however, was tapping notes into a datapad. "I am filing a report recommending that we increase human military contracts by an additional 20%. "What? Why?" Krell's tusks quivered with indignation. "Because if humans can do this," Thress gestured at the arena where a medical team was now helping the warriors to their feet. "When they are working for us, imagine what they could do working against us." That sobering thought settled over the council like a heavy blanket. "Motion approved," Krell said quietly. Down in the arena, Jinx had already left the building. She pulled out her comm unit and dialed. "Hey, Marcus, it's Jinx." "Yeah, I know. Listen, tell the boss the council approved our rate increase." "Yeah, Tier 2 plus back pay. I know, right? Took them long enough." She listened for a moment, grinning. "No, I didn't have to hurt anybody. Well, okay. I hurt their feelings pretty bad, and maybe some minor nerve damage, but it'll heal. That's what medical technology is for." More listening. "Oh yeah, it was hilarious. 5-on-1 they were all talking big about honor and combat records, and she made a whooshing gesture even though Marcus couldn't see it. Swept the floor with them, used one guy as a weapon. It was great. She reached her ship, a beat-up freighter that had seen better days but somehow kept flying through sheer human stubbornness and duct tape. Anyway, I'm heading back to base. Should be there by next cycle. Tell everyone drinks are on me, we just got paid." She climbed into the ship, settling into the pilot's seat with the comfort of someone who lived half their life in space. "Oh, and Marcus, make sure you spread the story around a bit. Not officially, just, let it slip in conversation. Maybe to some of those other species who've been trying to lowball us on contracts." Her grin turned absolutely wicked. "Let's remind the galaxy why you don't mess with humans." "Yeah, exactly. See you soon." She cut the connection and powered up the ship's engines. Through the viewport she could see the council building, all shining spires and diplomatic importance. Somewhere in there, 5 warriors were probably getting patched up and wondering what the hell just happened to their afternoon. "Humans," Jinx said to herself, pulling back on the controls and launching her ship into the black. "We're the galaxy's worst nightmare, and somehow everyone keeps forgetting it." She pulled up a music playlist, something with too much bass and lyrics about rebellion, and cranked the volume. The ship shot through the atmosphere, leaving the Council planet behind, carrying with it a reminder that humanity had learned to be dangerous long before they learned to be civilized, and that was a lesson they'd never forgotten. 2 weeks later, human military contractor rates increased again, not because the Council wanted to, but because word had spread about what happened in that training arena. It spread the way stories do in the galaxy, passing from species to species, getting embellished with each retelling until it became legend. The legend of the human who fought 5 champions and won with a sandwich in her belly and a smile on her face. Some stories said she was 8 feet tall. Some said she had cybernetic implants that gave her superhuman abilities. Some said she could see the future. The truth was simpler and somehow scarier. She was just a human. Normal height, normal abilities, normal stubbornness. And that was enough. Because humans didn't need to be superhuman to be terrifying. They just needed to be human, with all the crazy, improvising, refuses to quit, evolved on a death world, fought each other for sport, turned warfare into an art form humanity that came with the package. Captain Jennifer Martinez, callsign Jinx, became a legend not because she was exceptional for a human, but because she was exactly what every human was. A survival machine wrapped in skin, running on spite and pattern recognition, with 10,000 generations of fighting other humans encoded into her DNA. And that, the galaxy learned once again, was not something you wanted to fight against. It was something you paid very, very well, and you thanked your lucky stars they were on your side, because the alternative was unthinkable. In a bar 3 systems away, Marcus raised his glass. To Jinx, he said, who reminded the galaxy that humans didn't climb to the top of the food chain on our own planet by being nice. 20 other human mercs raised their glasses in response. To Jinx. And somewhere in the black between stars, in a beat-up freighter with too much bass pumping through its speakers, Captain Jennifer Martinez smiled and thought about her next contract. There were always more fights to win, and she really, really loved winning.